What you're about to watch is a real serve analysis I made for a recent student who lives nowhere near me, so he sent me video footage of his serve. He was looking for ways to gain more power, more spin, and more confidence. If while watching this analysis you think to yourself, man, I'd love to have Ryan analyze my serve or forehand or backhand, net game, maybe you want me to analyze your matches or your footwork, send me an email, ryan@2minutetennis.net, and I'll explain how to order a video analysis. Hey, Jeff, it's Ryan from 2minutetennis.net. Hey, thank you so much for the opportunity to do this video analysis lesson for you on your serve. So before we get to your areas for improvement, I want to show you something that I really like about your serve so that you know to keep doing it. And this is this position right here. I love it when players are bringing the racket up and the tip of the racket is pointing off to the right of the camera, obviously from the back view. This gets you primed and ready to use the proper throwing motion, being able to knock a birthday hat off of your head and use a really great circular swing. What I typically see from players who get analyzed is they go across their feet and the racket goes back here, but not you. You can see your racket goes down across your knees or kind of across your shins, and then you immediately begin to lift the racket up and the tip of the racket is pointing the same direction as your chest. So really great stuff. No matter what I recommend that you improve, I want you to keep doing that because it's already helping you to have a very good serve. All right, Jeff. So now here are your areas for improvement. I've got 6 of them for you. I'm just going to mention these really quickly. Go ahead and take a screenshot if you'd like so you can refer to these on court. At the end, I'll have your serve solutions that you can take a screenshot of as well. But very quickly, we're going to go over your grip. Your toss is too high. Your left arm drops too soon, or I should say too early. Your waiter's tray position, we got to discuss. You are swinging straight towards your target, which no matter what serve you're hitting, flat, slice, or topspin, you do not want to swing towards your target. And I'll show you why and how to do that. And then last, your wrist flexion after contact. All right, let's get started. All right, Jeff, number 1, your grip. So when you begin, you do not start off with a pure continental grip. But to make matters worse for you, you'll see it, look at your hand, right there, you refinger the grip and you change even more. Let me show you the grip you start with. Let me show you the grip you change to, and then the grip you should use and how to use it. Now, to understand grips, we want to know about the hand and the racket itself. So when it comes to the hand, 2 spots to keep track of: the base of your index finger and the heel pad. Now, when it comes to the racket, you'll notice the racket is straight up and down with the strings facing left and right. That's the correct orientation when you want to start counting the panels correctly. The top panel is panel number 1. And since you are right-handed, we're going to count to the right to count the panels. So panel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now, these panels are often called bevels, but I don't like calling them bevels because I think people can sometimes get confused on what a bevel is. A lot of times people think that bevels are corners when they're not. So I just decided to start calling them panels. That way, no one ever thinks that a corner would be a panel, right? So it's a flat side. So the grip you start off with is halfway between 2 and 3. So you place initially your knuckle and your heel pad, or the base of your index finger, and your heel pad on the corner between 2 and 3. There is no name for that grip. That's why I can't give you a name. There's no name for that grip. It is in between the continental and the eastern forehand. But as we saw, as your racket rises, you switch your grip. And it contributes to hitting flat. It contributes to the waiter's tray and swinging towards your target. And you then go to a full Eastern grip. Now, the grip that we want is the continental. We want your knuckle and heel pad on panel number 2. Now, from the beginning, throughout the motion, you're never on that grip. But there are 2 main things that you can do that will promote this grip. And I do want to say this. You might be shocked to hear that you're not starting with the correct grip. 80% of rec tennis players, if you interview them, I've taught for nearly 3 decades, so I've talked to tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of players, both virtually online with YouTube and in all my classes I do, but also in person. And 80% of tennis players will tell you they use the proper grip. Only 10 to 15%, or maybe as much as 20%, actually do use the Continental. So you're actually in the majority where most players who think they might use the correct grip, but they actually don't. So let me give you 2 ways to really help you use the proper Continental grip. And the first way is to eliminate bouncing the ball with your racket. If you watch at the beginning, right here, you bounce the ball a couple times with your racket. And then you serve. I'm sorry, you did a practice toss. You hit the serve, you get another ball, and watch. You bounce the ball with your racket. When you do that, it promotes the wrong grip. It promotes you using an Eastern forehand grip because it is very difficult to bounce the ball with the Continental. So by you bouncing the ball, you're forcing your hand to be in a forehand grip right before you serve. So the first thing I want you to do from this point forward, never again bounce the ball with your racket. Only bounce the ball with your left hand. Now, I will tell you, it is not easy to stop this cold turkey because you are so used to, it is so ingrained in your prep and ritual before you serve that you are going to find yourself doing it when you just tell yourself, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to do it, and boom, you're going to do it. It is not easy. And if you're able to change it easily, then hats off to you, and I'll give you a golfer's clap and a high five because that is awesome. But it is typically not easy for players to change this and to only bounce the ball with the hand. Now, the reason, as I explained, the reason I want you to only bounce with your left hand, bounce the ball with your left hand, is because when you begin your serve, I actually want your racket face to be open, not facing down, but actually facing up at about a 45-degree angle. And this is what I mean by having your strings face up at a 45-degree angle. This is a right-handed Rafael Nadal. It's not him actually serving right-handed. It's just, I reversed the video so that I could compare him to you. But notice his strings are facing up. This is one of the ways that coaches can tell what grip someone's using from 5 courts away. I don't care how far away someone is from me. I know what grip they have. Now, when I can zoom in like this and look at a hand, like that definitely helps to really ensure that my assumption is correct. But you will be right 95, 98% of the time if you just look where the strings are pointing at the beginning of a serve to know what grip someone has. So your racket right now is facing directly over to the side, where Nadal's racket is facing up at about a 45-degree angle. Why? Because his grip is different than yours. The more forehand the grip, the more the strings face to the left. The more continental the grip, the more the strings will face up at a 45-degree angle. So every serve from this point forward, I don't care if it's flat, slice, or topspin, every serve from this point forward, I want you to make sure that your racket face is open at 45 degrees. Now, that doesn't mean, Jeff, that I want you to hold the grip you always have and then just contort your wrist to open up the racket. That's certainly not the case. What I want you to do, and hear me out on this, is I want you to hold the throat of the racket with your left hand and have your right hand not on the racket. You are going to open the face 45 degrees with your left hand, holding the throat of the racket with your left hand, rotating the racket open 45 degrees. Then grab on with your right hand. And it needs to feel different, slightly different than what you currently use. If the grip feels good, it's incorrect. If the grip feels wrong, it has a chance of being right. See, when you change the grip on the serve, what actually changes is where the strings point. If you see someone with their strings facing directly toward the ground, they probably have a very strong Eastern forehand or maybe even a slight semi-Western grip. If the racket is pretty straight up and down, then they're probably between 2 and 3. That's kind of where you are. And then here, you can see the strings are facing up. When the racket's open at 45 degrees, they definitely have a continental grip, or the player will have a continental grip. So from this point forward, you are only going to bounce the ball with your left hand. And at the beginning of every serve, because of the different grip, your racket face is going to be in a different position and your strings are going to be pointing up. You can see Nadal's strings facing up. He's not going to be able to bounce the ball with that grip, right? Because the strings are facing up at 45 degrees. This is going to unlock your ability to really make the improvements that I'm going to suggest from this point forward. Number 2, Jeff, your toss is too high. So how do we know if someone's toss is too high? Well, simply we can use a timer to measure how long the ball stays in the air. If you toss the ball up to the clouds and then it finally comes back down, that timer is going to show maybe an hour, right? And like it's going to take a long time for that ball to go 3 miles up into the air and then come back down again. So here is Jannik Sinner next to you. By the way, notice his racket face is open, 45 degrees at the beginning of his serve. And that's because of the grip. So I want you to look how if I start a timer when the ball is near the top of the head, that his toss timing, meaning when the ball is at the top of the head until contact, his toss timing is 0.76 seconds. What I like to see is that the toss timing is somewhere between 0.6 and 0.9 seconds. I mean, with 0.76 being about as smack dab in the middle as you can get, right? So 0.6 to 0.9 seconds is really what we're looking for when we're trying to measure someone's toss. If their toss is sub 0.6, we would deem that toss to be too low. If the toss is above 0.9, we would deem that the toss is too high. So let's go to when the ball is near the top of the head for you. And that way we're comparing apples to apples, you versus Sinner. Remember, he was 0.76 seconds. .23. You have an extremely high toss. So a couple things that happen with a really high toss. The first is it makes it harder to be consistent. I noticed there was this line here. Now, I don't know if that's a line that you put down on the court. Maybe it was. Maybe you used that line as a place you want the ball to land. It seemed that way because you kept tossing and trying to hit that line. So, and if you were doing that, that's great. I love the fact that the toss is to the right of you a bit and into the court. That's awesome. But realize the higher you toss, the more variance is then exposed. So lower tosses, it's much easier to have a cluster, right? When you have a low toss, it's easy to have a cluster like that. But when your toss is way up here, then the cluster gets wider and it becomes more and more difficult, right? Because you might toss like this, and that toss turns into that. And this toss turns into that. And then the one in the middle turns into these, right? So as the ball goes higher, it really sprays and it becomes a wider cluster, making you less consistent with your toss placement. But a couple other things happen. When you toss really high, as the ball drops, it accelerates 9.8 meters per second, the acceleration due to gravity. So all of a sudden, as the ball's dropping, it's going faster and faster, and it's more and more difficult to hit the sweet spot, to time your shot with full extension and hitting the ball in the center of the strings. But another thing happens, and let's compare you to Sinner right here. So here's what we have to know. If I link the two of you, now your videos are going to run at the exact same time, by the way. You'll see that. I'm running the videos at the exact same time. You're both releasing the ball at the same time. Now, here's what's interesting. You are giving yourself 1.23 seconds to swing. Jannik is giving himself 0.76 seconds to swing. We know that the definition of speed is distance over time, like miles per hour, right? It's just, the definition of speed is just distance over time. How far you go in a certain amount of time is how you measure speed. So you are giving yourself 1.23 seconds to swing. Yannick's giving himself 0.76 seconds to swing. And what does that mean? He has to swing faster because he has less time to swing. When we toss high, we think of it as, oh, I'm giving myself more time. And that is true. You're giving yourself more time, but you don't necessarily want more time. Because if 1.23 is good, then wouldn't like 2.5 be better, right? It's like, if giving yourself more time is good, then why not chuck the ball up to the clouds, right? It's actually the opposite. The lower you toss, to a point, right? To a point. But the lower you toss, the better, because it creates the environment for racket speed. If I run this video to contact, Yannick has already contacted the ball, and you are just approaching the birthday hat position, that trophy position. In fact, if we run this video, Yannick's serve has already bounced, and you still are yet to hit the ball. There really is no need to toss the ball as high as you are. And you can see you really chuck the ball out of the screen, and the ball stays out of the screen, and you're not able to hit it because you don't have an arm that's 10 feet long to go up and get that ball. So you're having to wait for the ball to come back down. Where Yannick, his ball doesn't drop much. You can see his ball, like there, right there is the peak, right? There is the peak. And the ball, let me unlock the videos. There's his peak, and then there's his contact right there. So look at the difference. I don't know, is that maybe 1.5 feet? Maybe. I don't even think that's 18 inches. I don't think that is. I would say that's less. Maybe 13 inches, 14 inches. It's not a very far distance that ball is dropping. So what happens, right? It's easier to be consistent with the toss placement. It's easier to hit the sweet spot because it's not accelerating so much. When we look at your toss, I can't even draw the peak because it's out of the screen. And then if you look at how far this ball goes, there's your contact. And you probably toss, I mean, you're this tall, and I would say, let's say you're around 6 feet tall or 5'10". Like, you toss probably about 6 feet too high, where he tosses a little more than a foot higher than he can reach. And that gives him less time to swing, which is good because that forces him to swing faster. And we'll, for a little context, we'll look at some other pros. Here's Shelton and Taylor Fritz. So let's look at Ben Shelton. The ball is somewhere near the top of his head. That's all it needs to be, is somewhere close. And then we go to contact, and we'll see that his contact is at 0.76, no different than Yannick Sinner. And then we check out Taylor Fritz's toss, and he's hitting the ball at 0.78. Then we got Federer and PlayYourCourt. So let's look at Federer. Close enough. It's good. Remember, 0.6 to 0.9. And he is at 0.83. And then we got Giovanni. And he is at 0.65. You can see with Giovanni, like PlayYourCourt, that ball barely drops. Maybe 8 inches. And that's why his toss timing is lower, right? There's the peak. And like right there is the contact. I mean, that's not far at all. 6 inches, 8 inches maybe. And no wonder he can serve so fast. He's giving himself such little time to swing because he tosses so low, and then his swing's got to go so fast that he just crushes his serve. So it is definitely in your best interest for a multitude of reasons to toss the ball lower. Now, how do you do that, Jeff? The key is you toss slower. Your left arm is way too fast. I mean, the ball as an inanimate object can only go the speed you move your arm. And so your left arm is going up faster than Ben Shelton's, faster than Taylor Fritz's, faster than Roger Federer's, faster than Giovanni Pericard's. Because your left arm is so fast, the ball gets chucked up out of the screen. And then you got to wait for that ball to come back down, and it becomes harder and harder to time the serve. So I want you to toss the ball slower, much slower. If this is your contact right here, then I want you tossing no higher than there. I would love if you were in the 0.7s, 0.8, like around 0.8. I think the Taylor Fritz is really great for rec players, that 0.78, 0.8 position. Even Federer, 0.83, kind of in that range, high sevens, low eights. But being in the 1.2s, incredibly high serve and incredibly difficult to control the toss and really accelerate the racket. You got to swing slowly to let that ball come back down. Or if you toss lower, you'll have to speed your racket up. So this right here is really as high as you should toss. So when you toss the ball, right there is the peak. That's it. And then you could see you'd have to go, whoa, and you got to go really fast. And all of a sudden you start hitting 98-mile-an-hour serves. I mean, maybe not yet, but you open yourself up for much bigger serves out of sheer necessity because you got to step on the gas. No different than being late to work. You got to drive faster than maybe you normally would or want to. Give yourself less time, not too much less, right? I don't want you tossing below 0.6, but you've got to toss what feels to be incredibly low. That doesn't mean you're going to contact low. I still want you hitting at full extension. You're just going to have to toss low and then swing really fast to get the racket up there in time. That's one of the secrets to pros serving and swinging really fast is they toss lower, and they do that by tossing slower in order to give themselves less time to swing. Jeff, number 3, your left arm drops too soon. So when you toss the ball and you lift the racket up, and I'm going to put your racket and Federer's racket in a very similar place. I want you to look at his left arm versus your left arm. Obviously, Fed's left arm is up, your left arm is down. You'll see Federer's shoulders are sloped and at an angle with his left shoulder much higher than his right, where at that same position for you, you have basically level shoulders with your left shoulder an inch or two higher than your right, where with Federer, his left shoulder is probably an entire foot higher than his right shoulder. This left arm position allows for a great upward swing, which gives you great spin, great net clearance, and allows for consistency. An air target where you get good height over the net. When you drop your arm, look how that levels out your shoulders. And now all of a sudden at this point right here, and we can see the racket starting to drop, your shoulders are perfectly level, where Federer's are still at an angle. It is in your best interest to learn to keep your left arm up for much, much longer. Now, you don't have to go crazy with this in reality because you're not going to be tossing the ball up to the moon anymore. You're only going to be tossing, let's go to the contact here. So there's your contact. You're only going to be tossing to there. So I'm willing to bet your left arm is staying up almost long enough, but it still needs to be up longer. But I want you to keep that left arm up until the racket gets to the birthday hat. You can see with Federer, the left arm is up. From this view right here, doesn't it look like he's going to touch? Doesn't it look like he's going to touch his forearm with the racket? Watch this. Doesn't it look like he's going to touch his forearm with the racket right there? I swear. Now, when you look at it from the back, you can tell he's actually not, of course, hitting his arm with his racket and slowing the racket down. But it certainly looks that way from the side view along the baseline. So when your racket is here, I want you to have your left arm up still, that you feel like you're going to hit the racket with, your left forearm with the racket. It is a simple way of keeping the left arm up longer. This keeps your shoulders angled, makes for an upward throwing motion rather than a forward throwing motion, because the serve is, like, people talk about it being a throwing motion, but you're throwing up, not throwing forward. And so the shoulders angled like this really promote an upward swing rather than level shoulders with a forward swing. We want to be able to hit some topspin. Even if you look at Sampras on his flat serve, and Sampras is, I'm almost 47. Sampras is my favorite player of all time. I loved his service motion. He even had like a little bit of topspin. You look at Stefan Edberg, some topspin on their first serves. And that's really only possible, yes, with the grip and yes, with the right motion and all that, and not using the waiter's tray. But you've got to have those pitched shoulders. And that's why you need to keep that left arm up. So I want your left arm, after you release the ball, don't toss and then immediately drop that arm. You've got to keep that arm up, keep the arm right here, that hand right here, and then move the racket up above your head the way Federer does. He tosses the ball and then the racket, his left arm, by the way, is just staying here, and he's just waiting for the racket to come in over the head. Then it drops and then he hits. And that's what you've got to work on. Keep your left arm up for so long. Freeze this left arm. Now, don't freeze your racket. You got to keep the racket going, because remember, you're only going to have about 0.8 seconds to swing. So you can't pause this arm. You're going to pause this arm, keeping it up and moving the racket, what feels to be independently, and the left arm just staying where it is. But we've got to see from this view, and you're going to film yourself to check this, we've got to see that your racket gets close to the left arm. In theory, from this view, it looks like you're going to hit your left arm with the racket. This keeps your shoulders angled, makes for an upward throwing motion for speed and spin. Number 4, Jeff, you are using a waiter's tray position before hitting the ball. If we zoom in here, you'll see your strings are facing up. Now, this is not in your best interest, and I'll explain why in a second. But first, let's talk about why you're even doing this. A couple reasons. The very first and most important is your grip. Using a forehand grip, like an Eastern forehand, will position the racket with your strings facing up, no matter how much you work on this. Most players know that they're supposed to lead up with the edge of the racket toward the ball. But most players are not able to do it because of the grip that you're using. If you change to a continental grip and you don't change anything else, you literally just loosen up your grip right now and change the racket 45 degrees from an Eastern forehand to a continental, well, that means your racket would change 45 degrees. So let's use an angle here. So we're going to go like this. And then let's change it 45 degrees. So there we go. So your racket, let's put a little dot right there and then a dot right there. Perfect. Yeah. That's great. All right. So your racket would look like this by simply changing the grip. So the strings would be facing much more left rather than so up, right? So that's the first idea. And then you don't even have to change much, and then you're already leading with the edge of the racket. When you have the proper grip, it does most of the work to learn how to stay away from this waiter's tray position. But there's a drill that you can practice that knocks it out of the park, that completely fixes this waiter's tray position. And let me show you that drill now, and then we'll talk about the benefits that come from learning to get rid of your waiter's tray. And here I am demonstrating that drill. First off, I've got the birthday hat on my head, knocking the birthday hat off. I want you to watch how I'm using the wrong side of the racket to hit the ball. I'm using the back side of the strings. I'm doing it on purpose as a demonstration for a drill, a silly drill that you can practice that teaches you how to go up to the ball with your strings pointing down, which is actually the feeling that I want you to have and the position that I want you to get into. You know, most players, they say, oh, I'm trying to get the racket on edge, right? With the strings facing off to the left. And that's fine, but let's take it a step further and let's try to have your strings actually facing down rather than your strings facing up. And I'll show you Felix Auger-Aliassime doing that in a second here. But when you go up to the ball, I want you at first to, when you're ready to work on this, I want you hitting with the wrong side of the racket. If you have this as your intentions, you know what you're not going to do? You're not going to change your grip. Watch this. That right there, that's opening up your racket because you're probably trying to hit a perfectly flat serve, which I don't want you to hit a flat serve. And we'll talk about that in a moment. I want you hitting a side spin serve. But because you are probably trying to hit flat, it promotes the incorrect grip. It promotes the waiter's tray. It promotes you swinging straight towards your target. So I want you actually learning to use the wrong side of the racket so you can learn to not have your strings face up before you hit the ball, but to have your strings facing down. Let me show you this concept. And it is where the strings are facing down before you hit the ball. And then this is me actually demonstrating from a YouTube video, right? And then see the turn, watch this. See how my strings are actually facing down before I hit? Now watch the racket rotate. Now the racket's on edge. Now my strings are facing forward and then they keep turning, right? That pronation. But that move, that's what you want. You can see right here, your strings are facing up. My strings are actually facing down. This is a supinated position, which then requires pronation to hit. Your strings are already facing up, so you can't pronate. Because if you pronated, you would hit the left side of the edge toward the left side of the racket, the left edge against the ball. So you've, with your grip and with your racket face, you're guaranteeing that you're not going to pronate. So you're lacking the power that comes from that. But because I've got the continental grip, and because my strings are pointing down before I hit the ball, and my forearm is supinated, I am now going to pronate. And you can see my forearm rotate. Here my strings are facing left. Here my strings are facing right. Instead of trying to get this position, this on edge position, I'm teaching you this drill of hitting the wrong side of the racket so that your strings actually face down before you hit the ball. Here's Felix Auger-Aliassime. Look at that position right there. He absolutely, if he wanted to, could use the wrong side of the racket to go up and hit the ball. His strings right now are facing down. And then we just keep going and then he rotates. Here his strings are still facing down. The strings that are going to hit the ball are facing down. Now the racket's on edge. Then he turns. There's the pronation after contact. Strings are facing off to the right. After just before contact, his strings were facing left. And how did he do that? Look at his left arm, by the way. He's in the trophy position and the left arm is up. From this view, it would look like he's going to hit his left arm with the racket. Look at the shoulder angle. These are all the things that we talked about. Watch how as he goes to the ball, it looks like he's going to use the wrong side of the racket to hit the ball. That's supinated and it then necessitates pronation. So before we can even talk about pronation, you have to work on practicing the drill that I actually demonstrated, hitting the wrong side of the racket against the ball, to teach your brain that feeling to go up to the ball. And then right now, like if the tennis ball could think, it would be looking at Felix's racket going, why are you coming at me with the wrong side of the racket? And the strings that are going to hit the ball are like, guys, why are we looking at his shorts? Why don't we see the ball? And it's like, hey, forearm, don't worry. We're going to rotate. We're going to get you there. And that's how you snap at the top. It's a forearm snap. You don't just snap the wrist from palm up to palm down. You've got to go up supinated, which requires then pronation. This is the secret to getting the snap that you see at the top of the serve and the snap that you see from the pros, is you go up to the ball like you're going to hit the wrong side of the racket, and then you turn in order to present the strings to the ball. But once you start turning, the turn continues after contact, obviously. It just keeps going. But you got to do that drill where you practice hitting the wrong side of the racket against the ball to feel what it's like in order to go up toward the ball in a supinated forearm position. And now that drill I was demonstrating makes a lot of sense, right? It looks like I'm going to use the wrong side of the racket. And then I turn the racket and then I pronate. So obviously I can hit the wrong side if I want, or I can turn and hit the correct side. But now I hope that's like an aha moment for you, Jeff, that you're thinking, oh my gosh, that's the drill. Like I'm telling you, it's like a lot of times coaches will have you hit with the edge of the racket against the ball. It's not extreme enough. You got to use the wrong side of the racket to really teach that supinated position. And then what you do is when you toss the ball up into the air, you feel that supinated position and you mimic like you're going to hit the wrong side. And then you go to the ball thinking that you're going to use the wrong side. And at the last second, you turn the racket and you get this huge snap at the top of your serve. Number 5, Jeff, you are swinging straight towards your target. This is easy to understand. We're talking about where the ball goes and then the path your racket takes. Right now, your ball is going to travel along that line. You can see the ball traveling along that yellow line, okay? Look, as you're hitting the ball, you're tracking out toward that yellow line. And very quickly, the racket actually goes to the left. You can see that. The racket goes off to the left. We do not want to swing toward our target, ever. We do not want our hand tracking toward the target. We do not want our racket tracking toward the target. When you serve, because of your grip, because of the strings facing up, you are unfortunately forced to swing straight towards your target because that's where the ball's going to go, because your strings face where your racket's traveling, right? So what we want to do is actually swing off to the right. I would love when you're serving down the tee for you to swing toward, I don't know what that is. It looks like a sign on a gate, something. Maybe there's some like sign up sheets or something. This looks like a door. So on that door, it looks like there's something written there. I would love if your racket was swinging toward the side fence, or like kind of this corner where the back fence and side fence come together. Because when you use the proper grip and when you lead up with the back of the strings and you lead up them with the edge as you start to pronate, the ball will go left of where you're swinging. So if you were to swing the way you are right here, which is the ball goes this way and you're swinging this way, with the proper grip, your ball's going to go over here. And then you're going to look at me going, Ryan, that grip doesn't work. And then you're going to go back to the old grip again. What you need to be shown is that when you are hitting, it doesn't matter if it's a flat serve, a slice serve, a topspin serve, you will always swing to the right of your target to varying degrees based on the serve, but you will always swing to the right of the target. This ensures that you have success with the Continental grip. So first, to check this, we're going to look at J.J. Wolf. He played number 1 for Ohio State a few years back, and really high-level player. He can serve 136. Here he is against Bautista Agut at Indian Wells, hitting 136-mile-an-hour ace past him. And he's known for his muscle shirts and mullet. But very high-level player. I think he got into the top 40 in the world. Has been dealing with some injuries, and I believe he is back in the top 100, which is great. Let's look at this serve. So this serve is going to travel like this. So the ball travels along that line. But look at the direction his racket swings. His racket swings straight toward that person right there. Watch his racket tracking forward. He's not swinging toward the target. He's swinging to the right of the target. Now, why is the ball going where it's going? It's because when he hits the ball, his right edge is ever so slightly in front of the left edge, which points the strings this way. And then the ball goes along the green line. The ball doesn't go where you swing. The ball goes where your strings point. Let me say that again. The ball doesn't go the direction your racket is swinging. The ball goes the direction your strings are pointing when you hit the ball. So when he hits the ball, his strings are pointing this way. That's why the ball's going there. But he's not swinging that direction. He's swinging off to the right. And that puts a little bit of side spin on the ball, and that's a touch of control. Even flat serves have side spin or top spin. You don't want to think of flat serves as having no spin, and you certainly don't want to think of flat serves as having backspin. But that's like true, like a slice backhand, where like the opposite of topspin. But that's actually the spin that you put on your serve. Maybe you've noticed that you've got to hit your first serves really low over the net to get them to land in when you hit your fastest serve. And that's because you actually have slight backspin. Because of your racket face being open, you kind of pull down the ball, and the ball's actually got backspin, which makes the ball float on the air. And then you've got to hit an inch over the net when you hit your fastest serve so the ball carries long. What we want is side spin, even on your flat serves. Now, I'm going to recommend that you do not hit flat serves. At first, especially when you're changing the grip, I'm going to recommend that you, from this point forward, maybe for the next 6 months throughout this process, where you really master this serve and your serve is unrecognizable from today, 6 months from now, I want you to only hit slice serves. Let me show you Fritz and Federer hitting slice serves to show you the direction they swing. First, we got Fritz. Here's an out wide serve. He pulls the opponent off the court, then he hits behind him to wrong foot him. So let's look at the path the ball goes. So this ball is going to travel like that. So watch the ball go along that line, and it's an out wide serve. So we can see where the ball is going. But surprisingly, he swings toward this WTA sign on the back fence. Watch his racket track off to the right. Isn't that crazy? He's not swinging the direction he wants the ball to go. Look at his right hand. In fact, if I get rid of the ball, and I just showed you that, where would you think he's serving? You would swear, like, does this guy know how to play tennis? Like, why is he hitting the ball this way? Doesn't it look like he's hitting the ball that direction? It's crazy. And that's because the pros don't swing the direction they want the ball to go. They point their strings where they want the ball to go, and then they swing the direction that gives them the spin they want. And since he's hitting a slice serve because he's pulling his opponent out wide, which pulled the opponent off the court, which means the opponent's got to quickly recover, and that's why he's able to wrong foot him. This is a 1-2 punch done on purpose. You pull the opponent off the court, everyone knows that he's got to recover. And if the guy can recover in time and he hits down the line, he might get to it. So he decides, you know what, this guy's running back pretty quickly. I think I'll wrong foot him. And he hits behind him. It's ingenious, right? It's great. But he doesn't swing out wide. He swings way off to the right. Now on the flat serve with JJ, the ball landed there and JJ swung about there, kind of where that wealth management symbol is right there, right? So the ball went here and JJ swung there. That was a flat serve. But when it comes to a slice serve, the serve went out wide and Fritz is swinging way over here. So look at the disparity. This was the disparity on the flat. This is the disparity in where the ball goes and where the racket travels on a slice. You want to swing way off to the right of your target, not hit the ball that way. We don't want you to actually hit the ball toward the WTA sign. But because his strings are facing down, and he could hit the wrong side of the racket if he wanted to, because he's got the continental grip, because he's leading with the front edge of the racket, when he gets to the ball, his strings are facing left. So he has to swing to the right so that the ball goes into the box. So I do not want you swinging towards your target with the continental grip. You've got to, in your mind, pick a spot on the fence that's maybe 20, 30 degrees off to the right of your target, and that's the direction you got to swing. Here's Federer hitting an ace down the tee against Cam Norrie at Indian Wells on the practice courts. And so let's look at the direction the ball goes. Ball goes down the tee for an ace, right past him. Now let's look at the direction that Fed swings. Believe it or not, he swings over here toward these players and coaches. Look at the direction his hand travels. Just follow his hand. If I showed you that without the ball, you would say, oh my gosh, like, does he not like this guy? Why is he trying to hit him in the chest with his serve? Look at the direction the racket's traveling. Isn't that crazy? Look at his hand. Look at his right hand. So when you swing, I mean, he's straight up swinging toward this pole right there. Watch his hand, just his right hand, swinging that way. You don't want to swing your arm the direction you want the ball to go. With a continental grip, you have to swing to the right of your target as a right-hander. You will swing more to the right on a slice serve than on a flat. And you'll actually serve even more to the right on a topspin than you will a slice and a flat. But the slice is what I want you to start with. So when you hit a flat, you swing somewhat to the right, J.J. Wolf. When you hit a slice, you swing even more to the right, Fritz and Federer here. When you hit a topspin, you got to go over here. Like topspin serve, you swing nowhere near your target. It's one of the keys to hitting topspin. But that's another day, another analysis. So the goal is swing to the right of your target. And the lower toss, that toss that's going to be slightly to the right with that blue line on the ground, you're going to be able to swing off to the right, put the side spin that you need on the ball to get the ball in and also make it tough for your opponent to handle. And then last, number 6, Jeff, you have wrist flexion after contact. So wrist extension is a laid back wrist, or I should say wrist extension is like a verb, I guess, right? It's going back. And then wrist flexion is flexing the wrist forward, which is this right here. So your wrist is flexed right here and it's curled over. We don't want that. We want that pronation, that internal rotation of the shoulder. And at this place, like this moment right here, your string should not be facing down. Your string should be facing off to the right. And here's a great view of it. So right before Fritz hits the ball, his strings are facing to the left, as we saw. And that's because he's going up to the ball supinated, requiring pronation. But as he goes up to the ball, he starts pronating. But when he hits the ball, his strings are facing left, but watch his racket after contact continue to rotate. And right now his strings are facing off to the right. So you have to think of this as 180 degrees of rotation. On edge, you could balance a coin right on the top edge of the racket. And then on edge, right? You could balance that same coin on the edge of the racket. And it's actually, his strings are actually a little more pronated than on edge, but that's okay. Just think of it as the strings facing left and the strings facing, because his strings actually face up. That's how insane his pronation is. On a slice serve, insane. So his strings face left and then his strings face right. Easy. So we've got 100, I should say easy to understand, not easy to do. I'm not on the Pro Tour either. So I'm right there with you, Jeff. But 180 degrees of rotation. Now, here's where people struggle. They don't understand how to pronate and hit slice because they think slice serve that you curve around the outside of the ball. And you can see that Fritz is not doing that. His strings face off to the left and his strings face off to the right. So how in the world is he hitting slice? Well, that 180, we have to understand how much of that 180 degrees is occurring prior to hitting versus after. Here's where people get confused. Players think that more than half of that 180, which means more than 90, happens before contact. But it's simply not the case. So we can see that with Taylor. Here his strings are facing left. Here his strings are facing right. So 180 degrees. How much of that 180 of rotation occurred prior to hitting the ball? The answer is about 70 degrees of rotation happened prior, which means 110 is left over for after, meaning more pronation happens after you hit the ball than before you hit the ball. So watch his racket here. You can see he's just about to hit the ball. The right edge is still in front. And then after he hits the ball, there's more pronation of that 180 after contact. Now, players then say, well, why do it? Like if it's after contact? Well, it's one continuous motion. He can't stop it. He's just snapping the forearm. It's just like a golf swing. Why doesn't Tiger Woods just stop when he hits the ball? Why does he follow through over the shoulder? Because it's one continuous motion. Why does Usain Bolt run past the finish line? Why not just stop on the finish line? Because he'd have to be slowing down when he passes. So it's one continuous snap of emotion, of a motion through the contact. And so he's not going to stop it the moment he hits the ball. It's a very fast movement, like boom. And so there's no way to stop that. Once you start the turn, it just continues. But here's the way you want to think of this. Instead of saying, Ryan, how in the world am I going to do 70 degrees prior and 110 after? I've got to drill to learn exactly that. Because if you actually try this, it's impossible. But I've got a drill that's going to fix this for you. And if you have a TopspinPro, take the arm off so that you can spin the ball. And you can see that right there. I'm spinning the ball. But here's what you have to think of. Instead of thinking 70 degrees of turn prior and 110 after, I want you to think of 0 degrees before and all 180 degrees after. And that's what I'm demonstrating here. This is a swing thought in your mind that you have to think of. Remember, you're swinging to the right of your target, as we just saw with JJ, Fritz, and Fed. Watch how I spin the ball, Harlem Globetrotter style, then I turn the racket. The entire pronation and shoulder rotation, you can see my whole arm rotating. You can see my whole arm. Look at the wrinkles in my shirt. It's because it very much comes from the shoulder too. But all of that is coming after contact. I spin the ball, then I turn. Is this what happens when you hit the ball? No. Is this what you have to think of? Yes. And I think I get even closer to the camera to really show this. So I spin, then I turn. I spin, no turn of the racket, then I rotate the racket. Now my strings are facing off to the right. That is the forearm snap that gives you a ton of power and pop. You did everything needed. You tossed lower to swing faster. You knocked off the birthday hat. You came up with the back of the strings, and now it's time to snap the racket at the ball, the forearm snap. And it's just a continuation of that. So you got to think of, at this moment, kind of having, remember, your strings face down, and then as you get to the ball, you rotate to get it on edge. You have to think of sliding along the ball and then having all of the turn after contact, all 180 degrees after contact. And then you just keep going, you keep following through, and you can see my racket follows through down onto my left side. But that's the swing thought that you have to have in order to use the proper grip, to make sure that you're pronating correctly. And that just puts like a nice icing on the cake of everything that we've talked about in this analysis. All right, Jeff, here are your serve solutions. Please take a screenshot of this so you can refer to these on court. Number 1, you need a continental grip. Knuckle and heel pad on panel number 2. The easiest way to think of this is only bounce the ball with your left hand and begin with the racket open 45 degrees as a way of encouraging the proper grip. And if your grip feels normal when you're serving, it's not right. You got to really go, wow, this is different. This is very backhand-like. And then you have a chance of it being correct. Number 2, you need to toss slower to toss much lower. Your toss is higher than almost all pros you're watching at the US Open right now. And so you've got to toss slower so the ball doesn't go as high. You'll have a more consistent toss because I know you're practicing toss consistency. That's why you're always tossing and letting the ball bounce, watching to see where it lands. You will find that the cluster is not so wide. And so from one end of the spectrum to the other, when it comes to toss consistency, when you start tossing a little bit slower and allowing your toss to go lower. And it'll also force you to then swing faster, right? You'll have to swing your racket much, much faster, which is going to be good. It's going to make your serve go faster. It's going to make your ball curve. It's going to be great. Number 3, keep your left arm up and still while the racket comes up to the birthday hat. You know, it's very common when I ask players to keep their left arm up longer, they think of keeping the left arm frozen, but then they freeze the right arm too, and then that just causes another problem. So you've got to keep the left arm up as the racket comes up. And we saw that with Federer from the side view. It actually looked like he was going to hit his left forearm with the racket. You need to start looking for that in your videos when you review the footage. And that way you can start to see a big difference in your shoulder tilt, being able to hit spin, swinging up, huge difference when you start keeping that left arm up. Number 4, I want you to practice hitting the wrong side of the racket with the strings to get used to the supinated position. So instead of being in the waiter's tray or even just thinking of leading with the edge, I want you actually practicing hitting the wrong side of the racket. And that's what I demonstrated in my video I showed you. I actually showed you hitting the wrong side of the racket. That was the position that you saw with Fritz, and it was the position we saw with Felix. You swear he's going to hit the wrong side, and the last second he turns. That's that supinated position that you've got to have. So I want you hitting the wrong side of the racket to practice that. Number 5, I want you to swing to the right of your target and only hit slice serves for the next few months. This will also encourage the proper continental grip. Because you're trying to hit flat serves, you change your grip at the beginning of your serve, or you start with 2.5 and then you change to grip 3, which is an Eastern forehand halfway through the motion. I only want you hitting slice serves now. I only want you leading with the edge of the racket. And then number 6, I want you to think of having all 180 degrees of racket rotation happening after contact. I want it to be 70 and 110 as described, but there's no way to actually make that happen at such a high rate of speed. So what I figured out is that players will have something close to 70 and 110 when hitting a slice serve, swinging off to the right of the target, if they think of all 180 happening after you hit the ball. So think of sliding along the ball and then quickly rotating the racket 180 degrees as you swing off to the right and then follow through. And that gives you the forearm snap to get the racket speed that you're looking for. Thank you so much, Jeff, for the opportunity to do this video analysis lesson for you on your serve. I want you to go in the order in which I taught you here, right? So get used to these ideas. And I don't want you to go quickly. I just want you to think, all right, I want to swing with the continental grip off to the right of my target and just get used to it, right? At first, the ball's not going to probably go in, right? You're going to have to take a couple steps back to get better at this. But each idea leads to the next. If you just follow what I taught you, slowly but surely, and learn to change the technique you currently use on the serve, there's no doubt you're going to gain confidence, win more matches, and play much better tennis. This is Ryan Reedy from 2minutetennis.net. Jeff, you got this.